Okay, so I did my presentation on superflares. First it says, how has this disaster happened to Earth in the past? So technically a superflare has never really happened before. Very large solar flares are the closest thing that have said to have happened. The last solar flare was in 1859. It was almost considered a superflare because of its massive size. It bombed Earth with so much energy that auroras could be seen in really far places such as like Cuba and Hawaii. Right here is a picture of an aurora, which is basically just natural electric light that lights up the sky with like bright red and green colors and stuff like that. What impact did it have on the planets? So I guess first I'll explain to you what like a solar flare is, because scientists believe a super flare is just a bigger, more powerful version of a solar flare. They even say that its strength could be up to 100,000 times more powerful than just a regular solar flare. So when a solar flare happens, it can affect humans and satellites. Usually minutes or after a solar flare happens, we can see like the radiation levels go up, which means that the atmosphere contains a lot of charged particles. And the magnetic field is usually what blocks these particles from humans. But since like astronauts and pilots are super far up in the atmosphere, they would become exposed to all these particles, which would result in them having a higher risk of cancer and stuff like that. So some effects of solar flares would be that there would be like no radio signals, no wireless communication. It would leave millions and millions of people without any power. And so if all of these are effects of just a solar flare, that shows how extreme it would be if a super flare were to hit. It would just be so much more powerful and extreme, and the results would be the same way. So here is just a quick video basically of what a solar flare looks like. Okay, so the next slide. What are the chances of this happening to Earth? Well, scientists say that the chances of a super flare happening is very small, but it is possible of happening. They've predicted that an extreme flare happens every 250 to about 480 years. So based on the last large solar flare, Earth has about over 100 years or so before another big flare is supposed to happen. So what short and long-term impact on Earth would this disaster have if it happened right now? So if a super flare were to happen, our electronics would be destroyed, and it would potentially rip through our planet's protective atmospheric layer. So it would first light up the sun and contain lots of UV and like X-ray radiation. And after about a day, the plasma would begin to destroy all satellites such as like GPSs and communication systems. And then the particles from the plasma would move into Earth's magnetic field, which would result in massive auroras, just like in a solar flare. It would affect the magnetic field, and it would potentially lead to a worldwide power outage. And the atmosphere of Earth would also be affected, resulting in like radar and radio systems being shut down and stuff like that. And also scientists predicted that this would cause a superflare would cause a reduction in the ozone layer, and it said that the destruction of the ozone layer is one of the worst things that could happen because it could take up to like 5 years or so to repair it or rebuild it back to the way it originally was. Basically, an ozone layer is responsible for protecting humans from UV radiation from the sun, and so this ultimately would lead to all humans having a really high risk for skin cancer. And it's unknown what it would do to plants and animals, but I'm sure it would harm them in some way as well. So right here is a video is what short and long-term impact on humans and civilization would this disaster have if it happened right now. So most of the same things that happens that result from a solar flare would also happen in a super flare. It would just be a lot larger and more extreme. So power surges are one of the main concerns of what were to happen if a super flare hit. So solar particles could wipe out giant transformers, causing large cities to lose power for months or even up to a year. This would also cost lots of money, millions and billions of dollars to repair. And us humans rely so much on technology and electricity, internet, like communications resources through technology and stuff like that, that the thought of having long periods of time without all of that could lead to disastrous effects in our civilization. So all of the systems would be shut down, and there would be no power, no more transportation, no banking, internet, stuff like that. So people most likely really wouldn't know what to do without these things, and it potentially could result in the end of the world. So if all this happened, it would be very difficult to fix our world back to the way it was. So what would humanity do to try to fix these problems? So there are so many things that we would need to fix after super flare happened. Not only would all of the power be gone, but also things like toilets wouldn't work, and sewage treatments would shut down, and heating and air conditioning would stop working. So all of this would just take so much time and money to fix that it would almost nearly be impossible to have so many unavailable resources for humans to fix everything when it's just not there. It's hard to see, but this is a picture of money and a picture of like a sewage water treatment system. So is there anything humans can do to ameliorate the disaster before it happens? So there might not be anything that us humans can really do to prevent a super flare, but there's many minor things we can do to prepare ourselves for it. A lot of simple things that we do, like to prepare for a hurricane or tornado, would work. It could help a disaster. They're all natural disasters, so things such as like having extra flashlights and batteries, emergency candles, all of that would come in handy when the electricity goes out, and stocking up on non-perishable food and water, generators, extra fuel, emergency supplies, all of these things would help. Even silly things such as like board games and puzzles could help whenever the internet goes out and there's no more electronic games to play. So if one day a super flare does happen, hopefully people can be as prepared as possible. And that's the